Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, October 12th. This is a meeting of the Curriculum Committee of the Darien Board of Education. Our next meeting will be Thursday, November 2nd. Today on the agenda, we are going to have an update on the K-3 literacy update and hopefully an update on the waiver, and then we'll discuss Genius Hour. So I will turn it over to Dr. Adley and Dr. Fettigan.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mrs. Parent. As Mrs. Parent indicated, the first item on our agenda is a K-3 literacy update. I want to thank Mrs. Julie Droller, our Director of Elementary Curriculum, who will present some information today regarding an update with the waiver. There's not much to update yet. A little bit about the grants, the Right to Read grant, and what some of our professional learning has focused on since the beginning of the school year. Mrs. Droller.
Morning, everybody. So as Dr. Fettigan said, there is unfortunately not too much to report. The only thing, we had a meeting with the state and they are scheduling brief one-on-one meetings with each district. They're supposed to be sending a link to the superintendent. They haven't sent it yet. I checked with them yesterday, about 25 minutes with the group that is going to be reviewing the waivers. Decisions will be communicated. They said the end of November, they're going to communicate with all districts at once. It's not going to be a rolling kind of decision. That's all we know.
What is the purpose of that one-to-one meeting? Is it for them to ask questions of you or for you to plead your case, for lack of a better word?
Just for us to provide more color around our waiver.
Okay.
And perhaps for them to ask questions as well.
Okay.
Is it the same people having all the meetings, Julie, or is there like a committee and different people? It's a lot of meetings for them is why I'm asking. I'm wondering about timing.
Yes, it is the same committee.
Okay.
It looks like there's 3 people that were on this webinar that we attended, and they said that they will be meeting with people. They've developed a new rubric that they shared. It wasn't the one that was originally shared with us when we submitted the waiver last February.
So is there additional work then to
No,
match?
we
Okay.
can't revise anything.
Okay.
So, and not that we would, I mean, the waiver was very comprehensive. So hopefully we'll be able to just provide more color.
And just a reminder, once again, how many districts submitted a waiver? So how many?
Over
meetings are
90.
there? 9, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mhm. Oops. I'm sorry about that. So in terms of the Right to Read grant, I believe you know that districts automatically are awarded this grant through the legislation. Ours is an award of $145,000 over 2 years. However, the grant money can only be used for one of those 6 mandated programs. So right now, Amy and I worked with the state to revise our grant application to say pending approval of the waiver. So we don't have those funds available. It's over 2 years. So we don't have those funds available. But we also found out a few weeks ago that in order to even get that money, districts are required to send a team of professional learning. So it's myself, it's Nicole Pentor, our Director of Curriculum, and Patricia Falasinos, our ML coordinator. We are required to attend 10 days of professional learning. It's all virtual, and it's leadership systems and science of reading. So we started that already.
10 full days.
10 full days. So that's 10 full days that the 3 of us are away from students and teachers and classrooms.
And that's required.
That is required. Mhm. Yes. And a lot of it is about structures and some things that we already have in place here. So it's a little bit frustrating. So in terms of professional learning, this year we are continuing to work with staff developers, and Dr. Adley had the pleasure of coming into one of our kindergarten classrooms yesterday. Our professional learning is really about the science of reading and teaching practices. It is not about a program. In our PLCs, we're looking very closely at data, as we always do, but particularly this year, we have some new assessments. And I talked on Tuesday evening's presentation about our assessment framework. And it's the data that really informs our instruction, that formative data that we're taking a close look at. We are working on classroom libraries as we introduce decodable text. There's questions about what are kids reading independently. We are also, as a district, with our literacy team, participating in the state-sponsored ReadCon virtual learning. So that's something that our literacy team is participating in, and some teachers, just to see what it is, if it's new learning for us. So far, it's reading off of slides, which is not as effective as having somebody in the classroom modeling with kids. But we're doing all of this with an open mind. And I just wanted to show you some of the ways we look at data. This is our this is a phonic decoding assessment, and I took student names off, but just so you could see, we are tracking how are kids moving with these specific skills across our scope and sequence. So we look at this in PLCs. Teachers are looking at this for student progress, and this informs their small group instruction. This is just one piece of data, but I wanted you to just have a look. On October 24th, we have a parent session. We've already communicated that with first grade parents, and something is going out this week to all. We're inviting all parents, but it's really for our K-2 parents. It's at the Darien Library Community Room. And we're going to talk about some of the shifts to help parents understand what their children particularly are bringing home for reading, and what we consider like benchmarks, because we've relied heavily on Fountas and Pinnell reading levels, and this is a shift. So we want people to understand that.
All right,
Questions
about that. So a question about the TC staff developers. And Amy, you touched on this when we were chatting on the phone the other day. Can you talk to you a little bit about what those staff developers are doing in our classrooms now that, TC WRP has dissolved? Like, what does that mean?
Sure. So it's very unique to each school, which is differentiated and based on teachers' needs. So they go into, they have 5 days in each school, and there's about 90 minutes or so with each grade level, K1 and 2. And the administrators work with their teachers to say, okay, what is our focus? So they generally have a focus of the year. I was at Ox Ridge, and we were working on using decodable running records to check in on students' phonics skills, and then using that to plan instruction. So that was what that team was doing. So the staff developer would go in, they'd model, and then each of us went into the classroom and administered this, and we came back and looked at the data and made some plans. In kindergarten, we were looking at writing. The teachers specifically wanted to see what is the transfer of the phonemic awareness on students' writing, and how do we build that oral language and get kids to talk more and write more and add more details to their writing. So that was just an example of that. Second grade is focusing on interactive language, interactive read aloud to foster oral language and discourse. In another school at Hinley yesterday, we were working on some small group instruction in kindergarten, and what are meaningful activities that teachers can do, especially at this point of the year in kindergarten when students are 4 and 5, and to teach those skills that they need. So they were looking at a variety of just ways to reinforce letter sound, phonemic awareness, the phonics skills, and then what do you do with those kids that were readers? So that was their focus. But it's all about instruction. It's all about instructional practice.
And it's driven by the teacher's needs.
It's driven by the teachers.
Which I think is great.
Mhm. Yeah. And we're sharing practices through our district literacy team and through our professional learning days. We're sharing practices across each schools.
And how many TC staff developers are there? Is there the same person going to all 5 schools, or no?
We have 2 staff developers in over our 5 schools. They work closely together, and they're senior. They're both excellent.
It's great. Thank you. Questions?
The parent session on the 24th, is that going to be recorded and made available?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
It was good to see it being front loaded with our staff. I'm talking about the kindergarten section in particular. Our teachers over at Henley had time with Natalie, a good 45 minutes or so with her in advance, talking about what they would like to see of the options. She was actually provided some options, actually. So they discussed where they are in their needs and what they would like to see her do in the classroom. And the modeling of it was terrific. It was organized chaos. It was super.
That's kindergarten.
I say that affectionately and with great respect, but it was absolutely tremendous. The difference between that and a book, it was a tremendous learning experience yesterday.
And that's typically the model. The teachers all meet and there's some content and professional learning, and then they go into a classroom and they see it. Sometimes they're only watching, sometimes they're watching and then trying it, and then they come back and debrief.
Great.
And plan for next steps.
Going back to the Right to Read grant, so 90 some odd schools, districts want a waiver. If all 90 are approved, do you think that those monies will be approved
Yes.
to everybody? If they're not approved, we'll still get the money and we'll just have to use it for a different program, right?
Yes.
That's why we're at least following the trail and participating in the 10 days, which I
Yeah.
think is ridiculous, to be honest with you. But we're still
So
doing
going through the
just in
motions.
case.
Yeah. Okay,
It's a lot of time.
a lot of time, 10 days.
Quick question for 10 days for 90,000 or a 145 split. Are we losing money on that deal, having our staff in for 10 days?
I mean, I like to think that we can always learn something new. And I think that it's important for us to hear what the state is saying. So, that's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, I guess it'd just be simply whether the man hours, the budgeted time being allocated to that and versus what we're getting out of it. So just a small aside, nothing needs to be answered right now.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right, thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, the next item on our agenda is Genius Hour. We're joined today by Dr. Carolyn Dahlstrom, principal at Middlesex Middle School. And we're excited today to talk to you about this concept of Genius Hour actually originated with Google. This was referenced in the memo for this meeting, but for anybody who's tuning in, it's stemming from Daniel Pink's book, Drive, and some things that are out in the world that you know about and probably use and haven't ever considered how was this invented or innovated were actually Genius Hour products. For example, the company 3M and all of those Post-it notes. This was made popular again by Google, Gmail, and things like Google News are all products and experiences and parts of our lives that came from people who were engaged in Genius Hour work. It's really when these employees get 20% of their time to think and create and innovate within the context of their industry. So Dr. Dahlstrom and I will talk today about what the experience has been for staff and students. As you are likely aware, the Board of Education approved a first-year try at Genius Hour. This was approved in the spring of 2022, and the pilot year was the last school year, 2022, 2023. So today we'll share with you a little bit about what that implementation was. I think that you'll really see a very clear connection to our Darien Public Schools vision, mission, and certainly that strategic plan goal 3, vision of the graduate, really bringing to life experiences for children to demonstrate the attributes of vision of the graduate. We'll talk a little bit about, again, the implementation, what student and staff experiences have been throughout the pilot. We're going to talk about the idea of process versus product. Those are two really important things to consider when we're talking about teaching and learning. And just want to, again, enforce and reinforce how this work and experience for staff and students aligns to our board goals and the strategic plan.
So just to be clear, the process-wise, this is one of those items that the board put on their agenda to revisit. We've had a couple of these similar discussions. It will go from this committee up to the board at the next meeting. I don't think this is a long drawn out. I think today we'll complete that process unless the committee has additional questions. Our committee doesn't, or committees in general don't vote recommendations, but I would like to think that one way or the other we're taking a stance, tacitly taking a stance here or consensus around it. I'll say that we are supporting it. You'll see that coming through the presentation. But that being said, I would hope that we would take a position sort of like moving forward for the next board meeting, because we'd like to put it on the next board meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Dawson.
Perfect. Well, welcome to Genius Hour. I'm going to start by having you think for a moment. If you had a dedicated hour each week to pursue any passion, what would you do? So for a small amount of time, we allowed our students to think about this and pursue their own passion. And here is a sampling of some of the projects that our students did. You can see things like building a working engine, aerodynamics of airplanes, American Sign Language. I personally like the best glazed donut in Fairfield County. So they are very creative, very curious, and very ingenious students that we have at Middlesex. So what is Genius Hour? It is a whole school enrichment model that combines passion and inquiry-based learning. And one of the ways we introduced this to staff was to show this short video at the beginning so they understood the process of Genius Hour.
Genius Hour begins with a simple premise. Give your students 20% of their class time to learn what they want. They choose the content while also mastering the skills and hitting the academic standards. With Genius Hour, students own the entire journey. They choose the topics based upon their own geeky interests. It doesn't have to be a traditionally academic area. They might like fashion, food, or sports, or Legos, or Minecraft, or deep sea creatures. Students ask the questions and engage in their own research to find the answers. Along the way, they design their own plan of instruction. They decide on the resources and activities, and each student sets goals and engages in self-assessment. They work at their own pace and set their own deadlines. Students decide on the grouping. Some work alone, others work in pairs or in small groups. In the end, students figure out what they will make and how they will share it with the world. A word of caution, it's not a total free-for-all. The best Genius Hour projects have systems and structures that empower students to reach their full potential. Even so, there will be mistakes and you'll have to experiment. But in the end, students are empowered to be self-directed learners, engaging in creativity and critical thinking. In other words, they own the learning.
So as you can see, Genius Hour is a style of thinking. And instead of trying to remember and recall processes and procedures, it really has the frame of creativity, curiosity, and that type of thinking for the students. What would I like to do? How am I going to do it? And planning. In the Darien Vision of a Graduate, it articulates that students have the confidence and capacity to be self-directed, independent adults who live a purposeful, happy, fulfilling life, and that they would become citizens who contribute collaboratively and innovatively to their local and global communities. Genius Hour is a tool that allows them to do that, and it's self-directed and purposeful.
Throughout later in the presentation, Dr. Dahlstrom will talk about the concept of how this is implemented as far as instructional time and the logistics of when students and staff experience the Genius Hour. But one thing I would like to draw everyone's attention to is actually the mission of our school district, and that is about inspiring a love of learning. And so the concept, and if we anchor back to Dr. Dahlstrom's question, what would you do if you had a free hour that wasn't driven by some other priority or competing demand in your life, right? And this time allows children to think about a passion, something that they're very interested in, and explore that independently. And this idea of being an innovative thinker, thinking beyond the bounds of a typical experience in teaching and learning, where there's probably more structure around the content that's presented to our students. And so with that, Dr. Dahlstrom is going to expand a little bit on what Genius Hour is and what are characteristics of Genius Hour and what it is not.
So why Genius Hour? We looked at this as a completely different approach to learning and education. It's small pockets of time where students can experience school in a different way. So they are activating different parts of the brain. They're seeing a different social structure. The way students experience their teachers and their peers is completely different than a typical classroom with a chosen curriculum. They're freely allowed to explore the academic resources that we offer, the opportunities available to them, but they have a professional guide in their teacher in the classroom. It's driven by student passions and curiosity, and it's very self-directed. However, as we know in the video, even though it really focuses on the process of the learning, it is structured and has systems in place. So when we look at this roadmap of how it was rolled out, it was very scaffolded for the students and staff. And it began with why Genius Hour, what is it, and what is a passion? And we really worked with the students to uncover how they choose a passion and how they narrow it down to a topic. And then we taught them how to create a research question, something that is engaging to their audience, but cannot be Googled. So they had to really think about, what do I want to know about this topic, and what would my audience want to know? Why am I so passionate about it? And then they engaged in research and self-directed planning a project. The biggest part of this is, at its heart, Genius Hour is about the learning and the reflection piece, and that planning the project and elevator pitch is a key component to Genius Hour. So they were involved in higher level thinking and applying their learning through listening to peer feedback, peer assessment, self-assessment, and reflection to make any necessary changes to their project before they fully shared it with their class. We do have student representatives coming on the 24th, but they are in class right now learning. So I thought it would be important to share some of the pictures of the Genius Hour projects. So
Caroline, that's
We
three
have
from
three,
6,
one
7,
from
and
each
8.
grade.
6,
Yep.
7, and 8.
to represent each grade. But you can see some of the projects that were on that slide previously. So we have the biodegradable Legos, making movie magic, the aerodynamics of airplanes. There's the best glazed donut of Fairfield County. You can see the students in the bottom corner are really participating in that science fair-like atmosphere where the student is presenting to the peers as they walked around the room. And then here's one more, a couple images that show students that talked about the bait and how to fish and what fish to catch. We had a student that built a working engine. You might see him at the Board of Education meeting with the engine. And then students that created graphic novels and things that they were passionate about and wanted to share with their peers. And one of the biggest takeaways from this was that they felt connections with students they normally wouldn't, because they were able to share a passion and they found that other people had the same one. So it created a sense of community in the classroom and in the grade level of discovering other friends that they might not have traditionally interacted with.
So if you think about what we shared with the board earlier, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Earlier in a recent board meeting, we talked about convocation and Ron Berger's address, where he was talking about honorable teaching and beautiful work. And the idea of that is that there is an interdisciplinary opportunity that's purposeful, student-driven, and relevant and meaningful for the child learner. And we gave some examples in an earlier Board of Ed presentation. We believe that Genius Hour and some of the examples of what the students have experienced and pursued is a prime time opportunity for students to demonstrate that kind of learning, thinking, innovation, problem solving, etc. This was one of the quotes from Ron Berger, who's published many, many texts on the idea of staff experience with teaching and student experiences with learning. And that is there for you to see there. If you think about what Ron Berger is speaking about in that text and in many of his books, there is a direct alignment to our Darien Public Schools vision of the graduate, where we think about giving students an opportunity throughout their PK-12 experience to be communicators, to think creatively, to be curious about the world around them. This is one opportunity for students to do that while they're with us in their elementary, middle school, and high school experiences. Right now, focusing on middle school in grades 6, 7, and 8.
And just kind of reiterating what Amy had said earlier, how did Genius Hour begin? It was presented in the 21-22 school year and approved to pilot last year. We did have some feedback through informal conversations with students and staff, and then I have a principal's council, so almost like a focus group of feedback. And one of the biggest components was they felt there was too long between sessions when it was a month. It was very hard to reconnect their learning to what they had learned the month before. They felt it was too much time in between to remember what they had done the month before. So what we're doing this year is looking at making it one marking period or a quarter. So once a week during Flex, they're going to do a full quarter of doing the Genius Hour process. And then at the end, we'll have the extended flex at the end of the quarter. And the other grade levels can come down and actually have a true science fair of learning what other grade levels have done. So 7th and 8th grade will be visited by 6th grade, and then 6th grade will be visited by 7th and 8th grade. So they'll get the chance to see other grade levels and other students that they might not see in a school day. And I knew I was going to present, so I happened to stop an 8th grader in the hallway the other day. And I said, what do you think about Genius Hour? And he said, at the beginning, I was kind of confused. Why were we doing this? But as we went along, I liked it. And I said, what do you like about it? He said, it wasn't traditional schooling. He said, I got to do what I wanted to do, and nobody could tell me anything else. I had resources in an 8th grade words. This is my words. But he enjoyed it. He said, I enjoyed coming to school and having that time to do something that I was interested in. And I asked him what would his feedback be, and we talked about making it a market period. And then his feedback to me was, I wish it wasn't just once a week. So that was interesting to hear from an 8th grade student, that sometimes we feel like they might be the ones that push back a little bit more, but they found it very interesting last year, and they liked the opportunity to pursue passions and share it with other students. Now we're moving towards the 24-25 budget process.
So one of the things we want to think about always when we're thinking about teaching and learning, curriculum, instruction, how we assess for learning, professional learning for our staff, is what is the clear and direct explicit alignment to board goals and also our strategic plan. So once again, just as a quick reminder, goal 3 is that vision of the graduate. How do we define success? And 3A speaks to how do we operationalize? How do we really make visible and evident these goals within teaching and learning practice? So we do believe that Genius Hour is, again, one opportunity for us to do that with our students in the middle grades in grades 6, 7, and 8. And to Dr. Dahlstrom's comment about what her 8th grade student was sharing with her, I think when students can really find that passion and pursue something with interest, there's a great motivation for their learning. And who knows how that will extend as they go into high school and then post high school with college and career experiences. We'll see how they innovate in the future. Thank you, and we'll take questions.
Can I just ask, just for clarification, I know the answer, but you're the principal, so let you answer. Because it had come up, is this in any way competitive against Talented and Gifted or our gifted program and so on? Because I think there was perhaps a wee bit of confusion around that.
It's completely separate. So this is an enrichment model for every single student in the building, and it's done during flex time. So it doesn't impact the idea or the Gifted and Talented program at all.
Thank you, Carolyn. I think the title itself is a little misleading, the Genius Hour, and people think that that's only for geniuses, for lack of a better word. So I appreciate the clarification for that this is for every student. I'll just start off the conversation. I think at a 30,000 foot view, this Genius Hour idea is exactly what we want students to be doing, right? We want them to be pursuing passions. We want them to have choice and voice in their education, which at Middlesex, we've talked about at this table, like they don't have a lot of that at the middle school level. The high schoolers can choose their courses. Middlesex kind of gets, this is what you got. So this is, I think, really is important so that so the students can have a choice in what they're learning. There is a real benefit to inquiry-based learning, and there's not a lot of that at Middlesex. So at a 30,000 foot view, I'm supportive of this program. What I would like to understand better is how teachers are being supported in this, to the term of organized chaos earlier. That's kind of how I feel this is. So how do teachers just speak to what teachers, the role of the teacher and how they are supported in adding this into their day?
Of course. So the lessons that were scaffolded were created by a small group of teachers, and then they were rolled out with the staff. So they don't have to plan essentially anything. They have the lessons ahead of time. They know what they're going to be doing, and they facilitate. So they were kind of leading the students to understand what is a research question? How do I write one? Brainstorming with them on the board. They are more of a facilitator to the student learning. So the students really drive what they're doing. They pick the project, and then the teachers provide the resources and the opportunities for the discourse, but they are not standing in front of the classroom like traditionally and lecturing them. This is an opportunity for students to really have that struggle to learn with the supports in place. And so we provide the teachers with the lessons, we provide them with any supports they need. They came down and said, I need this for my classroom, or I have a student doing this project, and we order it. So we really kind of pop in and out and support what they give us as feedback of. Again, it was a pilot year, maybe a lesson didn't go so well, and they'll say it needs to be more engaging, or it needs to be shorter, or you have to add this component in. And so as we did it, and I hate to say the term of build the plane while you're flying it, we kind of did.
Mhm.
So we had it all laid out as best as we could, and then we, revamped as we went through the process, and that's how we got to where we are now. Through the marking period, we already have the lessons, and so it's, the second year of rolling it out.
So can you speak to just scheduling? So
Sure.
it's one marking period. So how often, how many minutes, what, is there anything being taken away because of this?
There's nothing being taken away. Last year, there were extended flexes once a month. And again, because that was too far in between, they're doing it once a week now during flex. So it's not impacting academics at all, and it's not an extended flex. It's their actual flex time. The only extended flex we'll have is at the end of the marking period where the other grade levels can come in and see it. So it's not impacting any of their classes.
Okay.
Thank you. I loved your question about if you had an hour a week, what would you do with it? And I think that one of the points that's worth making is even if you do have an hour a week, you don't really feel entitled to take it. So the fact that it's kind of put upon you to have time, I think that's just worth noting because it's very hard for all of us to say, I'm going to take an hour and I'm going to work on flower arrangement or what have you. So it's a neat model in that way. I do think to Sarah's questions, it would be helpful to have some discussion when we take this to the full board about why educationally and developmentally this is the right program at middle school. That felt like it was missing for me a little bit here. And the points you made were well made, and I do understand it, but I think that would be a good addition. The idea of community I thought was interesting. I have a college freshman this year, and first year seminar is a big thing at her school. And while they're not choosing their own project, so to speak, there is a variety of seminars available to them to choose. And a lot of them are not terribly academic. And a big part of it is to explore a passion and find people that share that passion. So I don't know if that's something to build on or to stress more as we move forward. I know we're talking about middle schoolers here, not college students, but I'm sure you get the point. But I think that is an interesting component of it, to be able to find things that you love and other people who love it as well. Student feedback, I think, is helpful, and faculty feedback, I think, is helpful in this conversation. And then I had an idea about trying to build enthusiasm and excitement about it. I don't know if there is an opportunity later in the year when fifth graders visit the middle school, but to let them see some of the products of the Genius Hour project. Maybe they start thinking about what their passion
What they're
might
going
be,
to do.
or start getting excited about something they're going to get to do at middle school that they weren't able to do at elementary school, for example. So just to throw that out there.
I will say just a wee couple of other things. I honestly am thrilled by this program. I think the return on investment of it is exponential compared to what we're actually spending on. But it's not a budget question. But I mentioned about the gifted program. I should also mention though that I've had experience of some, that wasn't called Genius Hour, but something experience of this enrichment sort of model for all kids. This is a type of program that is absolutely supported by the National Renzulli Gifted and Talented Program at UConn, for instance. Right? I mean, this is exactly the type of program that we're talking about. This is exactly we were sitting here talking about AP courses and other courses that kids could explore and so on and so forth. This is the type of thing that we want our kids to be doing, and we want our staff to be in. I will say this though, even what was said in the wee video clip, and having sort of lived something like this at grade 6, right? At that particular time, it is a process of iteration. Like you've just given a wonderful wee suggestion here, right? And I'm sure our parents and so on and so forth can give other ones and solicit stuff. It is a process of iteration. There are mistakes, and teachers will learn how to adjust and how to improve, and from schedule to topics to research to presentations. It is a wee bit of a commitment to learning by doing a wee bit. I'll just share that because it is iterative as the program continues and improves moving forward. So there's a couple.
No, I agree with that. And I think last year was a pilot model, and you've learned from it. Clearly you've adjusted, you've heard what students are saying, you've heard what teachers are saying. So I commend you for shifting things around a little bit and taking that feedback to heart. So, I think it'll continue to evolve and change, but I think overall the idea of it to me is well worth the small budgetary amount that it is. So,
And the time.
and the time.
Hey, Sarah, I had 3 questions if I could.
Yep. Hi.
Hi. So yes, I agree at the high level. It sounds great. Three questions were: one, why is this not an elective? The second question was, while I appreciate the few anecdotes that were provided, have we done any sort of a broader data sampling from students to get an idea of overall broad participation interest, or what their thoughts are, not just a few people? And then lastly, Alan, you said ROI and this would be exponential. Could you tell me how you measure that?
Well, let me just don't be taking particular words and maybe perhaps extrapolating too much from it. I'm just saying that there's a potential in this program for kids to learn and explore. They're doing the things that you would want our kids to be doing. And the idea of contributing to pursuing their own passions, taking ownership for learning as they go up through the grade levels, those are the things that we want our students, even as they go into the high school from 9 through 12, to take ownership for their learning. And the more that we can do that, the more they're going to be prepared to go out into the real world and post high school and so on. So I use the word exponentially in terms of the potential for promoting the things that we want the students to be doing.
In terms of the other question, so why is it not an elective? Because I would like every student to have the opportunity to do this. And if it was an elective, it would be a choice few students. And currently our schedule does not allow for an elective in 6th grade. So they would be completely excluded. So the reason why it's built into the schedule as a flex and doesn't impact academics is every student has the opportunity to participate in Genius Hour. And as for the data, because it didn't finish until the spring, it was a full year process. It was the informal feedback and the talking with the teachers and the staff and the students. But we did get a good sense of what they felt by all of the projects that were completed. If there was a student that maybe didn't do a project, it was very few and far in between. Most of them found a partner and they found groups, or they did individual projects. And that's kind of the data for us, seeing this in person in real life, of how they were able to take their interest and share it with other students.
So question about the project. So, it said in the video, no deadlines, and it's more about the process than the product. Were there examples of students that, didn't have a beautiful finished product? And were there different stages of completion in those presentations at the end?
There were, but I would say every project was beautiful, if you want to say it that way. We had some students that did it online. We had some students that made poster board. We have some students that presented a musical piece and played. So it really revolved around what they chose and how they presented it. So there was a range of projects, and that just depended on what their passion was.
And was there any, at the end, was there any time for the students to reflect upon the process? And was there, a rubric of, this is what I think I did well, this is what I think I could have done better, I really liked doing this on my own? Was there any metacognition from the students?
There wasn't a form or a rubric self-assessment, but I know that the flex is at the end. So after each flex presented, they had a discussion in the class, and that's where some of that feedback came back from the teachers.
Because I think that, that piece might be important, is what did this, how did this help me learn? How did I feel when I was not being told by a teacher what to do? That piece of it.
That's what you want them to do.
Right.
I do think maybe even for the next presentation, we can quantify. We got for from David's question, actually, a wee bit more quantifying around just the scope of the feedback we got, right? That's be a bit more, we can include something like that.
And I'm sure for some kids, they didn't love it because they don't like the non-directed learning.
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's a different way of thinking. And
Yeah.
that was the struggle in the beginning, and why we had to revamp the process and look at some of the lessons, because some students, they're used to being told what they have to learn when the test is going to be. And so for them to have free reign and say, you want me to do what? It
Right.
was intimidating to a middle school student, but we tried to work through that with them. And eventually, everyone had a project to present.
Yeah. I mean, I have a middle schooler who's a very in the box learner and she struggled with it because it was hard to come up with her own idea and not be, and it ended up liking it. Yes. Anyways, any other questions?
I would also appreciate, there's one or two parents here. I'd also appreciate the parents working with us, because I say this sort of affectionately, a wee bit casually, that sometimes when new processes, programs, it's okay. Well, they're good ideas, but do them after my kids leave, right? And fundamentally, we kind of know that they're good ideas for kids, but can't let go. So I appreciate, we'll keep the parents involved in terms of their feedback, but also I appreciate the fact that it can be new learning for us as parents, right? To see something like this in place. And I appreciate the parents giving a wee bit of space and support to let it bloom a little bit.
If I just may add to that also, it has access for all learners, and to your developmental point earlier, inherent in the process is differentiation.
Right.
And when you're looking at goals and skills that you learn along the way for all learners, you're looking at research skills, developing, and it's on your own pace and level, so you have that opportunity. Presentation skills, showing what you know in different ways, not having traditional assessments, but having ways you can show what you've learned in whatever your model is, whether it's a graphic novel, or whether it's a poster board, or whether it's a video. So I think it has that opportunity as well. It also yields post-secondary thinking. You know, what are my interests? How do I attach that to it? So you begin that whole transition planning and post-secondary thinking as well. And self-assessment, because that is a component of it. How did I do on it? What could I have done differently? I think the teacher as a facilitator is an excellent model also, because you can really have individual conferences, you can go back, you don't have a whole group at a time, so you can have that kind of individualized instruction to really guide you. And lastly, it does have executive function skill opportunities, really organizing and planning and doing that. So we're big proponents of this for those reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's incredible benefits, and I think, as Alan mentioned, that there will be iterations and it'll evolve, and you'll continue to hear feedback and adjust. So, I know Alan wanted a sense of the meeting. I am fully in support of continuing as it continues to evolve. So, Julie,
So am I.
Dave,
Still on the fence. Thank you.
Still looking.
still on the fence.
Like,
Are there other things you would like to see at the presentation?
No, I think Alan touched on the data. I think that'll definitely be helpful. And again, I'm not a big fan of surveys generally, because they're, small samples and kind of biased, but I just don't know. I guess what my concern in the back of the head, maybe this can be addressed, is just with all the other things kids have to do and what flex time is really there to do. I don't know why forcing them into this if they have other things they would rather do. And I appreciate the high level, like if I had an hour to reflect, sounds great, but in practicality, I'm just not convinced. And the fact that everybody turned in a project is not convincing to me, because I doubt there's many middle schools who think they're, being given assignments and they're optional and they don't have to turn them in. Like, of course they're going to turn something in. So I'm not quite getting over the line. I think if this was an elective for people who are interested, I think it'd be a fantastic, but I think putting everyone in who may have other interests, I haven't been convinced yet. So that's where my hang up is.
So to that point, Carolyn, what is being taken away? So you said there's nothing being taken away because of this. So if Genius Hour wasn't there, what would that time be used for?
It would be an SEL flex on Monday. So we have one on Monday and Thursday. We're doing mindfulness on Monday. So for one quarter, instead of doing mindfulness, they are doing a Genius Hour, which is a type of mindfulness. If you think about it, they're really learning about what to do and focusing on something other than everything else they have to do. It's an interest, it's a passion base. So it goes hand in hand with that mindfulness
And
Monday.
do you get the sense that students feel that this is just another something added to their plate?
I think in the beginning, absolutely, because it was something new. We had to roll it out, we had to introduce it, but by the end of it, the feedback from the students was they enjoyed the process because it wasn't a chosen curriculum for them. They got to do something they enjoyed, and seeing what other students' passions were and making that connection with something that came from the student feedback. And having students say to me, I wish it was more than once a week, was a big takeaway for me that, okay, they really did enjoy the process. It might be a struggle in the beginning. Like you said, I think it's a struggle anytime when you're not told what to do or have a set curriculum, and you have to really think about and self-reflect, what are my passions, what do I like to do, and how am I going to present this? Those are big thinking ideas, and those are big skills to learn. So it's going to be a struggle in the beginning, but as they get into it, there was buy-in from the students in every flex that you tapped
And
into.
my guess would be that sixth graders would be kind of, hesitant, seventh graders a little less so, and eighth graders, maybe by the third year they do this, they have a really good idea of what they would like to do.
I think last year it was the opposite. Sixth graders were gung ho.
Yeah.
Seventh graders looked more of a community wide. They were more of how can I impact my building and what I'm doing. And then the eighth graders were a little hesitant because they were ready for high school and just tell me what I need to know to get to high school. But this year it was the eighth graders that said, I want more than once a week. And it was their feedback. So I think that they've had the process of doing it once already. And they know what to expect. So I think it'll be a little bit easier this year of having them kind of jump right in.
Can you just give us a reminder what kind of choice middle schoolers have in their coursework or classes, what kind of electives they're choosing among or not choosing among?
They don't have choice in electives. So for sixth grade, they have art, music, and PE. And in seventh grade, they have PE and music for one block, and then they have STEM, computers, health, and art.
But they're not opting in or opting
No,
out.
it's just the set
That's just their curriculum.
I think that's, excuse me, an important clarification on really the term elective might be a little bit confusing there. It is a part of their core programming in school, all of those courses. And additionally, I think when I think about Dr. Adley's comment on allowing this to bloom, I see that there are probably future potential opportunities for students to have experiences with people within the community, depending upon their passions and interests, and beyond probably the Darien community, to connect with people in different industries. And I think that's another really important thing for us to think about.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, for the board meeting, we heard questions such as that, more, a wee bit more specific on the data versus flex versus elective, hard teachers leading the staff, where we are in that particular process. Was there anything else you would like us to include, or?
I think just a little more discussion on why middle school, why Genius Hours, right? for
developmental,
middle- Yes.
yeah.
Some of what Shirley touched on, some of what Sarah touched, I mean, some of what we all touched on.
All right. Moving on to public comment. Is there any public comment in the audience?
Good morning. If anyone in person would like to participate in public comment, please come up to the podium. If anyone online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands.
Okay, motion to adjourn? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Cheers, guys. Bye.